Welcome back to another week of Instigating with Clarkey and Drury. Ryan Drury here. As always, we're brought to you by our friends at Larry Hudson Chevrolet Buick GMC here in Listowel, Ontario, and the Listowel Squash Courts. No Clarkey on the show this week. He's off, so I'm very pleased to be joined by a special guest host, our friend Steve Sabourin of CKNX Jr Hockey, and we're joined by an even more special guest. No disrespect, Sabby, but we've got a pretty special guy on here with us, and it's following a big announcement. Longtime Listowel Cyclones president, executive. I mean, what role hasn't this guy filled? Heck, he was a player for the franchise. He's done everything, literally, from the ice right up to the front office. Wayne Long. Wayne, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. Good to be on here.
It's good to have you, my friend. Obviously, the big news this week, you are retiring. You are stepping down from your role with the Listowel Cyclones. And again, like I mentioned off the top, I mean, you've literally done everything. You played for the team. Your passion for the team runs so deep. I mean, take us through, the decision and has it started to sink in yet?
Yeah, the decision, like 18 years is a long time. And as everybody knows, things take their course. I've been, like you said, I started 2 years of Junior C, won a championship in Junior C, first year Junior B in 79-80. Moved back to Listowel in 04-05, just the Cherrey Cup year. And there was some executive changed. The guys had brought the club up to that level. Some guys had retired. Don Annett was sort of the last man standing, asked me if I'd join. So I did, and brought some fellow friends and other local people onto the executive, and they stuck around for 11 years. I guess you could say the last of the executive from 05-06. So it's been good. Yeah. So, 18 years, the last, we were discussing before, COVID had a bit to do with this. I was in Listowel every Friday night, so it was very easy to go to the rink, be around all the time. Thoroughly enjoyed it. But when COVID hit, season was canceled. I live in Owen Sound. I started working 2 days a week in Listowel, and Fridays I was working from home. So it was making it harder for me to get to the rink every night, to be there, whether as president or executive member or GM. And another factor is it's time to bring some new blood and some younger people in so that they can bring in some fellow friends, executive members to take the club on for the next 5 to 10 years or whatever it is.
It's been quite a ride, Wayne, and I know that first big Cherrey Cup win back in the day when CKNX started broadcasting the playoff games there. Take us through the years. I mean, the highlights for you have to be a lot, and just not the championships, but seeing these young men come through the system and move on to their lives and even some bigger and better things.
Yeah, part of being on an executive, and especially a local town, you get to know the kids really well versus maybe a bigger center. The kids were probably the most billets of any team in the entire GOJHL, which means the kids are in town all the time. They live with billets, they become friends of the families. So you see them all the time. You see them with their billets. And like you say, from 05-06, we've met, I don't know, do the math, that's a lot of kids through the years. And when you're at the rink at practice, being an assistant GM and GM, I was at the rink a lot. You really get to know the kids, and our goal is to make better people out of hockey players. Also is to see them go on to their goals of whether it be OHL, NCAA, university hockey. You can just think of names all through the years that kids we've had that have accomplished all those things. And to me, that's as rewarding as, I don't know. It's very rewarding. I don't know if it's as rewarding as a Cherrey Cup and the Sutherland Cup, because that was the cherry on the top. But and to this day, I still keep in touch with some of the kids. Like Caleb Cameron's a good example. Just retired from the Macon Mayhem. Most games ever played by a team player in that team. First sweater to be ever retired by the Macon hockey team. And there's a guy that was the heart and soul of our hockey team. He's OHA Player of the Year 1 year. So that's just one example. I could go down the list of the kids that have went on to play OHL, went on to play NCAA, I think currently we have it's either 3 to 5 kids playing in the NCAA right now. And that's from our Sutherland Cup team. So yeah, the list goes on. Like you say, Cherrey Cups and Sutherland Cups were fantastic. We had, I remember years where Game 7, we lose 1-0 to Elmira on a fluke goal, like stuff like that. We were so close so many years, but just to get over the hump, that was what the final was, the Cherry and the Sutherland Cup.
It certainly was. And those were magical runs that I definitely want to dig into more of, because they're such a significant part of the history of the team that you were overseeing, Wayne. But I want to go all the way back to when you first became part of this organization, when you were playing for the team. I mean, it started off as a Junior C franchise. Many people watching this and listening will only be familiar with the team as a Junior B franchise, but your ties to this team, I mean, I think it's really commendable and incredible, your story with this franchise, because you go back so far. I mean, like I said, you've literally done just about every role, but maybe the ice keeper for the Listowel Cyclones. Take us back to all those years ago when you started playing for this team. Did you ever envision that you were going to carve out a legacy like this after you were done playing, let alone with a team that you played for?
Yeah, never back. When you're young, you're busy doing other stuff. You got to remember back in Junior C. So Junior C was 7 years. For the executive, Bob Zister, Bill Bingham, or Ron Bingham, all the local guys in the executive, to make a decision back in 1978, I guess it would be, to go Junior B from the Junior C League was a massive decision. And a lot of people didn't think it would fly. The league allowed us, which was, we were small, very small center, and today we are still small. To allow us into the league was something back then, because, you had the usual strong team, Stratford, Waterloo, Elmira, to let Listowel in was something. So for them to do that, like that was the ground, that was the hard work to go from Junior C to Junior B. And then 40 some years later, we sit here and we sort of forget those things. But like you say, some people wouldn't even know we had a Junior C team. And we had a very good Junior C team, very strong hockey. So it's been quite a journey. So, when we talk about what we accomplished today, we're just continuing on what people have done in the past. Over the years, Listowel's struggled as similar to some other clubs, had some pretty lean years. There was a point where the team wasn't really going to survive 1 year. And that was before I started. People were literally going around and asking people to donate money to pay some bills to keep keep the players on the ice. And that was right before the 04-05 Cherrey Cup win. And for the team, the 04-05 was the turning point. You win a Cherrey Cup, go to the first round of the Sutherland Cup, or the round robin back then. You put some money in the bank, and now you've got a structure that you can carry on with. So starting it in 79, 80 was huge. Winning the Cherrey Cup sort of sealed, to some extent, the survival of the team. And after that, there was a few lean years, but then, we had a stretch of probably 10 really good years where we were getting some good talent. It's the old story, good hockey players are the best recruiters you can find. So if you get a few core players, they'll recruit some guys. You got to remember the old Listowel Arena, and, love it to death. Everybody's got some fond memories of it. Compared to Stratford and Elmira and Waterloo, if you had to pick a dressing room to be in, I'm not sure ours was the one you'd pick. I remember back to the old Junior C days where we had to share 2 rooms just for our team. And then we moved into the Junior B room, and we had a little equipment room back in the corner, and used another room for changing and stuff. And so it was hard to recruit. So going from the old arena to the new arena was the next phase of making the team even stronger, because now we've got probably one of the nicest by far dressing rooms in the entire league. And some OHLs dressing rooms are very similar to what we have. We don't have the size, but the look and feel is very good. So that makes it easier for recruiting players.
Going back to that 04-05 season, it's interesting too, because Listowel made it as, middle of the pack. They had to go through, the upper echelon teams. It wasn't that Listowel was the number one seed going in.
No, they're seventh.
Right, and they ended up facing Owen Sound in the final, which was a dynamic story because the top four seeds were gone, and it was Owen Sound and Listowel, and you had the big line, the Spaulding brothers out front there leading the charge, and the community was just rocking. It was unbelievable, and then even between that run and the run with the Sutherland Cup, there were some fantastic seasons where, you'd go deep in the playoffs. And I think, Wayne, the one thing that strikes me with Listowel is the complete effort to include local players on the roster. Because I think you and your crew, due diligence, hard work, and just look for those guys that other people would pass over, and you'd say, hey, no, they have something to offer, and bring them in.
Yeah, that's some small town mentality. Some teams will search all over the country for kids and try to bring them in. And literally they've got kids that live up the street that have played all their minor hockey in that team. And sometimes they don't get the fair look. And, that's their loss. Sometimes that was our gain. We get some kids out of Waterloo, Kitchener, Owen Sound for a few years that would, and they're good enough to play in the league and turned out to be fantastic hockey players. But for whatever reason, they get looked over sometimes. And then, we're in the outskirts of the university kids, so we have to offer something more than the other clubs to some extent to get the kids to billet in Listowel or to drive from Kitchener, Waterloo because they're going to school at the universities, or to come from Fergus or Laura. You think about it, we do have a fantastic hockey area that we can draw from compared to, we don't necessarily need to bring the kids from Alberta and Manitoba in the north to some extent. And they've tried that in the past. Some have worked out great, and they're still, some of these guys come back to the reunions we have. But overall, if you can stay local, by far, that's the way to go.
Yeah, it certainly makes things a little more special. And I know people around here definitely appreciated that. And, we really saw that come full circle where, the team led by that group that Jason Brooks was in charge of course, Jesse Cole, who's still with the team now and will remain head coach. He was part of that staff when they started putting together that double Cherrey Cup team. And of course, the team that eventually won the first Sutherland Cup, that we were very lucky to be a part of that journey and ride the bus with the guys. And that was a really, really fun spring, Sabby? It's probably the most fun I've ever had being involved with the game. And, take us back to that time because, obviously you're well established in your tenure with the team, Wayne. You've seen a lot of success. You've seen a championship team before. Like you mentioned, a lot of great players coming through that you could run down over the years that have gone on to great success. But when Jason Brooks came in and started building that program with a lot of local guys, and then went out and found those other pieces that completed what ended up being a pretty nice jigsaw puzzle for you, they win that first Cherrey Cup and everybody was so banged up. I remember they were so out of gas against London, who was loaded that year. And I remember all the guys coming off the ice and they were just heartbroken. They were so upset. But I remember Cullen Mercer coming off the ice and saying, we're going to be back next year. He was the one guy that came off the ice and was not in tears. Everybody was so upset. And he was the one guy that skated by me, and God bless him for doing a post-game interview in a tough situation after a Game 6 loss. He was the one guy that was not all upset, a guy who'd been through the wars in the OHL. And he stopped and said, before I went on the air with him, we're going to be back here next year. I promise you that. And we're going to go all the way. He was that confident, and they did. And it was incredible. What was that like for you? You won championships as a player, but I'm sure it's a bit of a different emotion as an executive to be watching the game and to see that level of success come through. It must have just felt like such a mission accomplished for you.
Yeah. One thing I can remember, like it was yesterday, Brooksy and I were down in Elmira. I think it was Game 6 in the final round, and we're sitting there warm up, and I looked at him. I said, wouldn't it be nice if we won the Cherrey Cup in the old arena and the Sutherland Cup in the new one. He goes, wouldn't that be nice? He goes, it could happen. Just so the note of confidence, right? And we did the exact same thing. It was the last year we were in the Listowel Memorial Arena, and we won the Cherrey Cup. Our objective was to win the Sutherland Cup. Like you said, we had a bunch of injuries. Guys were gassed, but when we moved into the new arena, the Sutherland Cup was our only goal we had. It wasn't a Cherrey Cup again. It was a Sutherland Cup. So, that's just those little things you remember that, I just said it would be nice, right? And he goes, well, it'd be better than nice. It's going to happen. So that's, and he knew the players he had and the building it took to get those. A good example, we talk about players recruiting players. So, we had our local core, the Nickel Twins. Ted went on to Kingston. Blake stayed with us, became one of our core players. Had Caleb, a few other, Dilstra, a whole bunch of local guys. Then there was a kid called Holden Lancic. He's a draft pick to Erie Otters. When he came, and Holden, if he hears this, I apologize, but Holden wasn't the greatest skater you ever seen. So here's a kid that came, probably third line. And so Jason and I went and met with him and his mother at their house. And Holden said, after, he says, you know what, people call all the time. He says, you were the only people that came to our house and sat down. I think his grandfather was there and talked to us like a family and how you were going to treat us. So then we bring in a guy like Holden Lancic, and to watch a guy like him, Chase Herford, we had Riley Robertson, those guys. To watch him start as a 17-year-old, because he played in Wingham as a 16-year-old, and then his final year to score 111 points and dominate the entire league with points, and Chase right beside him and the rest of the guys. Like, that's just, you can't say what that means. So, winning a Cherrey Cup with those core guys, a lot of local guys. So we get Ben Van Oudegen comes back from the CCHL. All of a sudden, Cullen Mercer comes back. He's playing in Saginaw. And then all the pieces just fit. And those guys gelled like a team I've never seen gel before. I was talking to somebody from the Wellington Dukes, and they won the OJHL that year. And that guy said we would have beat the Wellington Dukes that year. He said we were a machine. So we played Caledonia, took them 4 straight. I did some research on that. They had 14 players who had played in OHL, played over 1,400 OHL games, and we swept them 4 straight. So it just tells you the core of players, the coaching right from top to bottom, all the hard work, like that's what it took. And that's maybe as good a junior B team as you'll see in a long time on the ice.
Wayne, I've been covering junior hockey locally for 18 years now, and I have never seen a junior B team like that.
No.
It was amazing. Although I do have to ask you, in that Sutherland Cup year, did you have any nails left after that Game 7 against Waterloo?
None at all. And then we have a call-up score as the winner, right?
Yeah. Verbeek, yeah. One of the all-time great clutch goals that we'll ever see. That was, I don't think we had nails left, Steve. We were calling the game, and I was chewing through my knuckles down in the Ray Ferraro box, as we affectionately refer to it as, between the benches there at the Steve Kerr. I could barely hold on to my mic. I was so nervous because I was just thinking, like, God, like they're right there, and if they can just get through this, it'll be that extra bit of gasoline they need. And you did. And there were so many clutch players on that team and so many storylines. Like you said, I mean, you look down that lineup even now, like I run into guys from the team. I see Holden Lancic constantly. He lives a couple blocks from me. And, like every time I see him, it takes me right back to that spring and just how incredible it was. And you mentioned, obviously, the Caledonia series, like people know what that program's all about. They load up all the time with these guys. And I agree with your friend with the Wellington Dukes. Like I mean, my Washington Capitals won the Stanley Cup that year. Give me the Cyclones against anybody. I would have taken them against anybody. Because they were that deep a team, but they were so tight. And like you hear that about championship teams, but like we were there with them. We saw it close up. Like to experience something like that, even from the outside, just covering it, Steve, like just think of some of those moments. I think about that Max Wright save in game 2 on that 5-on-3 power play where it looked like his right leg was going to pop off. Like all the clutch goals that Chase Herford scored, all the big hits that Nickel would lay. And Steve, I don't know about you. I was down at ice level to run onto the ice and do the post-game interviews after that game 4. When Blake Nickel scored into the empty net from his own goal line, that's the loudest building I've ever been in my life. That was unbelievable.
No, the sellouts, the signs on the arena door sold out before anybody even got in line was amazing. But Wayne, I also want to touch a little bit when you talk about how the programs develop players, not only from a skill sense, but when you look at that championship team and even some of the other teams that were high powered in the past, the one thing I noticed, the egos were checked at the door, because you had guys play roles where on other teams they'd be number 1 or number 2, but you had guys buy into the program and execute it very well.
Yeah. There was, few teams can run 3-4 lines. You don't care who's in a power play. You don't care who's killing penalties. You don't care about the matchups. And you're that deep. And not some of the guys weren't as deep as the top lines, right? But they knew their role and they were coached. Like they were like a machine. It's like clockwork. Like it just, the puck went in the corner. You get 3 options. They knew exactly what to do every single time. They never got, you get burnt once in a while, but it was just unbelievable to watch and just control the game from start to finish. Now, and Ryan was saying about the Waterloo, we got a couple breaks in that game and won it to, game 7. I just remember how many times that's happened to us over the years. We went to game 6 or 7. I used to travel a lot. I was in Chile one time and I was listening to you fine gentlemen on the radio in Chile. And I think it was a Cambridge game where the guy shot the puck from center. I think it was game 7, bounced over the goalie's shoulder into the net to win the game.
Yeah. And that was after an injury delay. There was an injured player on the ice for Cambridge, and then they reset the play, and all it was a dump in by Listowel, and Listowel went to change, and all the Cambridge guy did was just shoot it down the ice. Everybody thought he was just going to dump it or flip it, and it was a shot on net and a win in. I remember that. It was myself and Scott Pettigrew on the call, and we were shocked.
Yep.
And that was a tough one. Want to touch on a little bit, Wayne, about the volunteers, because I know you work very close with the community and everybody who steps up. It takes an enormous amount of heart to put this program together every Friday night. Playoffs, everything, but to give the players the full experience. And I mean, it's been a fantastic crew for a number of years.
Yeah, we executive, it's no different than any other organization, volunteer organization. They're the core of what goes on. People come to the game, they buy their tickets, they expect to see good hockey. Being an executive member, it's not really our job to put the players on the ice. The job is to support the team with advertising dollars, man the doors, make sure they have bananas and drinks in the dressing room. So for an executive member, you go to a Friday night game and you see them at the front. That's just a little bit of what they do. And I'll tell you, Listowel businesses and community support Listowel like no other. I talk to people around the league, and there's 11 community-owned teams, and the rest are all privately owned. We are by far the largest in advertising money. They can't believe how we get supported in a small town. So that all goes every June we get ready. Everybody gets their list. You go out, knock on doors. You can advertise from $200 for a business card to $3,100 for a corporate sponsor. And very seldom do we ever have anybody turn us down. And we have people come up sometimes, just donate money. Say, here, just put this towards whatever you do. We feed the guys after the game, every game. That's all volunteer. A lot of it is. And we have people just step up, and it's amazing. But like you say, the executive is the core. I always tell guys, and this is one of the reasons why we needed not a change in my position, but we just need some younger bodies If you don't have an executive, you don't have a hockey team, and people forget that. It just doesn't. Guys just don't show up, and we got to pay. We have I'm not sure how many dollars people think it takes to run a team, but it's a lot of money. I don't really want to say because it's a lot. So it would boggle a lot of minds. So if you don't, when I say about winning this Cherrey Cup and the Sutherland Cup and you put money in the bank, you have to have that money for the next 10, 12 years, because you might have some lean years, because once the money runs out, the team, and teams, this happens to teams. And we've been very fortunate with Listowel and the entire community. When I talk about Listowel, I'm talking about like Palmerston, Harrison, Milverton, Mitchell, Moncton, Wingham, all of them, the entire area sponsors, at some sort, whether advertising or whatever. And it's amazing. And it keeps the team going. And, we'll get some new, and we do have some new executive members joining. Greg McNeven's taken over as president. Greg's got a great history in hockey. Trent McClement, his record, he's did fantastic in Mount Forest, played for the Cyclones back in the old days. Coach St. Mary's, those guys love hockey. And along with our executive, Brad Haynes, and all the rest of the executive, they all do it for one reason. And it's for the kids, for the community. I had 3 girls, none of them played hockey, and I thoroughly enjoyed. I got in on the executive because I wanted to help out.
And I think that is about as well as you can put it, Wayne. And, I know from our perspective, just speaking for myself and really for all of us with the CKNX crew over the years, I mean, you're leaving behind an incredible legacy. Want to congratulate you on the retirement, obviously, and all the hard work that you've put in over the years with all of the great volunteers and different staff that have been a part of it over the years. And yeah, I mean, geez, you run down the list of guys, NCAA, you look at guys like Mitch Dealstra and, Max Coyle, you mentioned Caleb Cameron, who is a friend of this show. I'm sure Cameron's going to enjoy watching this episode and all the great things he's done, and Lansink, all these guys that want to get into coaching now and continue the legacy that you bestowed upon them when they were members of the Cyclones. I don't know how much Overdrive you watch. They have the statue talk all the time. If anybody in the organization deserves a statue outside of the Steve Kerr, it's probably you, Wayne. So
yeah, I wouldn't go that
and I really mean it. I do. I mean, a plaque in the very least. They got to give you a plaque or something, right in the front door. I think it would be a good spot for it. No, seriously though, from all of us here and just dealing with you over the years, it's been such a pleasure. You ran a heck of a club over there. It's going to continue. And again, just congrats from all of us here, man. It's been a real pleasure, and hope to see you at the rink, even though you're not officially, part of the executive. I know you'll still be wanting to help out and stuff, and looking forward to running into you at the rink and stuff. Congratulations, Wayne. It's been a pleasure, man.
Yep, I appreciate everything you guys have said. And I'd like to say what a fantastic job you guys do at the game. Broadcasting. We get so many compliments of the job you guys do and people listening on the radio at home. I don't want you to do too good a job, because they're going to sit at home and just listen to you instead of coming to the rink. So, when the arena's sold out, knock yourselves out. But we'd sooner see them in the arena. But it's the truth. You guys do a fantastic job. We appreciate the support. Reaches people that would never get to a game, and that's fantastic. So thanks from the hockey club. I want to thank you guys for doing that.
Absolutely, man.
Wayne.
Been nothing but a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much. Wayne Long, longtime president and executive of the Listowel Cyclones. We'll take a quick break here. When we come back, Johnny K, John Kollias, the one and only of Johnny K Sports and of CKNX Jr Hockey. He's going to jump on with us. It's finals time. Pollock Division, Hanover Barons, Mount Forest Patriots. We're going to preview it next here on Instigating. Welcome back to Instigating with Clarkey and Drury. Ryan Drury still here and still with Steve Sabourin, and very pleased to be joined by Johnny K, the one and only John Kollias, who is a fellow member of the CKNX Jr Hockey crew. And we're very excited to break down what should be another incredible Pollock Division final. The number 1 seed Mount Forest Patriots are going to take on the number 3 seeded Hanover Barons. Guys, it's been an incredible run all the way here. We've seen some great playoff action, but These are two monsters. These are two teams that are kind of in different boats. One that's enjoyed a lot of recent success in the Patriots that got kind of knocked off their pedestal last year by Mitchell, who are back in the final. And then a team in the Hanover Barons who went all the way to Game 7. They were right there on the brink and had everything fall apart on home ice to those Mitchell Hawks last year. They're hungry to right the wrongs of yesteryear. Steve, I'll start with you. Just sizing up these two rosters, are we going to look at another 6 or 7 game war here? I think we might be.
You know what? It's interesting because we were trying to take a look back through the years and pick out years when the final didn't go 7 games. You look at Wingham Walkerton, Kincardine Walkerton. You looked at Mitchell Hanover, the Mount Forest when they went through their runs. I mean, a lot of these finals have gone to Game 7, and I can't see why this one wouldn't as well. You have a Mount Forest team coming off a 7-game series against Wingham in the semi. They may have a bit of a tough time getting the gas can filled back up. They exerted a lot of energy. They played 3 games in 4 nights, including Monday night's Game 7 win on home ice. They start back up right away, basically, and play 3 and 4. With that being said, Mount Forest has some very, very talented players, and they really showed their skill and drive in that series against Wingham, one of them being Brody LeBlanc. You have the rookie in Chimanowski and Elijah Brahani, who, according to Rob Nixon, the general manager of the Patriots, is the nicest guy you'll ever meet, and he's really talented as well. But I think beyond that for Mount Forest, what really impressed me was in Game 6 and 7 when Mount Forest back was against the wall and they're down, 3-2 and it was tied 3-3. It was the one line that really stepped up. Jared Rowe, Jordan Leach, kind of their high energy line, really did some great forechecking work and tied up the Wingham Ironman. So they did really well there. For the Hanover Barons, they've had a bit of a rest, and you're right, they are hungry. That conversation we had with Wayne Long about, or what you said about Colin Mercer, we'll be back next year. We're going to be here. This is the only goal they have, to go win a Pollock Division championship and move on as far as they can. And right now, Hanover is really, really focused, and the time that they've had off has helped to heal some injuries as well.
JK, obviously you've had a really close look at these teams throughout the season as well. And as you size up both these rosters, obviously, as Sabby just mentioned, they're coming into the final in very different circumstances. Obviously, Hanover with a very impressive 2nd round win, dusting off the champion Mitchell Hawks in 5 games. And then Mount Forest, they got to go the full distance with a very rough and tumble Wingham team. I mean, looking at this matchup, what sticks out to you on either side that might give either team the edge in your opinion?
Talk about the Hanover Barons, starting with their playoff run last year and the first half of this season. I always had the opinion of anytime I called the Barons game, they're either really good or really bad. But that attitude has changed the last half of the season. They went through some adversity, like their top goaltender, Riley McCabe. He was hurt, but I found that, their veterans picked it up. And the last 5 games that Steve and I have called, I thought they've been really good. Defensively, great breakouts, excellent goaltending. I think it's just a year of experience. They're back at the finals. What did they do right? Well, what can they do differently from last year and kind of build on that? Coach Peter Irwin's got a excellent coaching staff, some young guys, that played for Brooksy, and they're bringing that to the table. So I think that you're going to see a lot more patient Barons team, and not more. Maybe last year was more of a we're here, and then Game 7 at home was just a debacle for them. But that's just a life lesson, right? They can go back to that, and they've learned from that. As for the Patriots, you talk about last year, the early exit by Louis Livingston's Mitchell Hawks, who ended up winning. I find that impressive that, you go on a 2 or 3 year run. I know we have some COVID years there, but the Patriots were on top, and then they stumble. but you don't see too many organizations stumble, then get back to the top. Like, it's usually like there's some good runs in this league, but for the Patriots to kind of, get back, and they started 14-0. Was it 14? It was a good run to start the season. And they had some adversity too, near the end, some injuries, and, it's going to be a great series. Adam Bell asked me the question on the radio, like, who do I take the advantage the first couple of games? Is it, Hanover because they only played 5 games against Mitchell, or Mount Forest because they won 7? And I think those Mount Forest Wingham games were tough. It wasn't easy. And at, one bad bounce, I think it's the Wingham Ironmen playing the Hanover Barons. They were that close to beating the Mount Forest Patriots, especially game 3 at home for Mount Forest. They played a perfect game, except, one bad bounce, and the, Patriots won that game. But Ironmen win that game, it's a whole different story. So there's a ton of adversity that the Patriots got through. And like every team, they have injuries. So it's usually that first game that, it wouldn't surprise me if, maybe Hanover got the jump on them. And, I feel like they will be tired a little bit, but it's going to be great to see tomorrow night.
You know what? It's going to be interesting too, because the way Wingham structured their game plan against Mount Forest, heavy forecheck, chase the puck. When you look at the Hanover Barons and their skill set, and they have some pretty speedy guys, but not the crash and bangers that they have on Wingham. So it'll be very interesting to see if the Barons will take the initiative and pressure hard first, to try to catch Mount Forest off guard, or maybe take advantage of any endurance issues Mount Forest has. We're also dealing 2 teams who play the trap. So once there's a substantial lead on either side, they settle into a trap situation. So it's almost who's going to get to the trap line first, and who is better equipped to break the trap. Because, again, both teams have some very good skaters and puck handlers on their forward lines. Also, D, I would have to give Hanover the advantage on the defense at this point in time. They have Peyton McIsaac, the Defensive Man of the Year in the Pollock Division, but they also have Chris Berry. They also have Cam Angst. They're big. They can handle the puck. They can move. They can shoot. From Mount Forest side, they got a couple of guys, but they really played a lot of Charlie McKenzie and McGurk on that back end in that Wingham series.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the trap. Sorry. Both teams play it, and we've talked about it before, how sometimes you create more offensive opportunities with the trap, because when teams try to break out normally or pass it out, there's always turnovers. And we saw Wingham trying it late in the game, trying to skate the puck out, but that's almost like running in quicksand. So it's going to be interesting, because I feel like they both play, like you mentioned, Steve, the same game plan. We just have to see who plays it better.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And you do wonder, how much health will factor into this. And obviously the Patriots are a little more under the gun in that sense heading into this final than the Barons are. Steve, we saw the elder Cribben do a lot of damage in his days as a Mount Forest Patriot, and to lose the younger one now on this playoff run and what was looking like and could still be such a promising run, but to lose, what I think most people would probably call their most versatile offensive weapon and the go-to guy that was stirring the drink on the power play a lot of the time for them, to have him not healthy could be a real make or break situation in this series if it comes down to who's going to be able to make that last second play that potentially snags a win, right?
Absolutely. And Coach Bobby Kirby and the crew, that's not lost on them. They all know, the entire team knows that they would be better with a Caleb Cribben in their lineup. And that's why there's a lot of talk about some of the other guys stepping up. Like Brody LeBlanc had a fantastic semifinal series. I think going into game 7, he had 14 points in 6 games or something like that. So you know what you're going to get from Brody LeBlanc. Brahani was a little quiet. Szymanowski stepped up huge in Game 7 with 2 goals, including the winner. So, you know, when you look at his season, he was fantastic. But again, I point towards that line of Leach and Rowe. And those are the lines that are going to have to step up. If not put points on the board, at least keep Hanover pinned in their own end so they don't get offensive chances. So again, Hanover similar with Wingham in that respect is that we saw JK in that series against Mitchell. Hanover was rolling their lines really well. They weren't counting on one line. They were throwing out everybody. So it made it tough to key on who to shut down. So this is where depth for the Mount Forest Patriots will really have to step up. Brian Richardson as well, number 16 for the Patriots, can be a real pest in the forechecking department. So those are the type of guys that are going to have to continue that to kind of keep Hanover pinned.
Yeah, I completely agree. And JK, you know, I'd love for you to expand on that and kind of, you know, break down some of the guys that maybe aren't household names on the score sheet all the time, if you will, that could maybe step up in this series and make a real difference, because we know that, you know, typically at this level, you go best on best. You want your number one line out there trying to shut down and exploit, if they can, the other team's best players. And then the power play, you know, they generally wash each other out when you get into a final. We know both these teams are great on special teams. Who are some guys maybe down the lineup that you think have a real opportunity to become an unsung hero in this series?
That's a good point. Like for Mount Forest, they struggle with secondary scoring, and Steve mentioned, you know, Rowe, Leach. And I felt that was the key in the third period of that Game 7. We saw a lot more of the Leach, Rowe, and Weiler line, and they just needed, like LeBlanc and Brahani and Szymanowski needed a rest. They needed to, like, because they played a ton the first 2 periods. And that was kind of like, not surprising, but I just thought it was like a strategic move that all the grinders are out there and they're doing their job. They're not out there to score. They're just out there to not get scored on and give their guns a big rest. So that was a good point by Steve on Rowe and Leach. The Barons, you know, Hanover boy Calhoun, Ryan Calhoun, he's played well. And Coach Pete Irwin, the game that Steve and I called with Mitchell, he did use all 4 lines. And I remember when I spoke to him pregame, he talked about that. And sometimes we know when we're talking to coaches, oh, we're going to roll 4 lines, and sometimes it doesn't happen. But he used some APs. Durham kid Austin Farlow played well. I know they use Aiden Stanley. Both those kids are APs, but they play. And that's what both teams are going to need. Mount Forest, number 8, McClellan, he plays AAA, and, you know, they used him a few shifts too, but it's all the analogy of, like, you're only going to get so much out of your top 2 lines, right? With Cribben out for the Patriots, with Cribben, they had a 1 and a 1A, 1B top line. Well, when you take him away, now they just have 1 top line. So look for the Patriots to kind of like, to split up. I know Brahani and LeBlanc have played together. It wouldn't surprise me that if he separated those 2 and tried to make two lines, because on the road, you know, with Hanover having last change, they're going to put their best checking line. So they're going to try to split up those 2, and then you'll see them on the power play together. But look for both teams to kind of move their top guys around, and just a kind of a chess game to see who you know, flinches first.
You know, guys, it's going to come down also to goaltending, right? And I mean, I know that, you know, Steve, you're probably going to bring that up. Like, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a good reason. You know, if you have good goaltending, you can go a long way. If you don't have it, you're not going to go anywhere. And both of these teams have had it throughout the season. But, you know, if I'm sitting here I generally kind of look at the team that I feel, and it's harder to call in a final, but the team that I feel has the better goaltending, and we know who the big cat in Hanover is. We know what their goaltending's all about. Okay. You know, Riley McCabe has cemented himself as one of the best goalies that you'll find across the league, let alone this division. Mount Forest has two guys that split time this year, and at times both Sean running with the number one ball, but we saw it a little bit at the latter stage of that Wingham series where Szymanowski struggled a bit, Meyer struggled a bit, and they were flipping them around a little bit. So what is your assessment of where the goaltending sits, and more specifically with Mount Forest, where they are still, it seems, kind of feeling out who the number one guy is, which I don't know if that's necessarily a disadvantage when you get into a final, but when I'm coming up against a guy like Riley McCabe, who I know is going to go in there and do the A thing every single night for me if I'm Hanover, I'm maybe feeling a little bit better and my chin's a little higher walking into the rink knowing he's in my cage than Mount Forest going, who's starting for us tonight? Your thoughts,
Well,
Steve?
you know, that probably would have been the thought, had Mount Forest won Game 5 when they pulled Vance Meyer in favor of Tristan Szymanowski. There was a backhanded goal, wrap around late in the first period, which put Wingham ahead, and they pulled the goaltender and started Tristan Szymanowski and ran him for the rest of the game. But Game 6 and 7, Vance Meyer came out and played. He was incredible for Game 6 and 7. In Game 7, he was saved toe-to-toe with Garrett Gawley. I mean, it was a 1-1 game going into the third period, and both goaltenders were stellar. However, with that being said, you look at Riley McCabe, and it's his team all the way through. You're not going to deviate from that. And when you look at what happened in Game 7 last year in Hanover against Mitchell, McCabe is showing extreme focus at this time. And it's not just that he's making the saves, it's how he's playing the game. It's how he's managing his crease. It's how, he's facing shots, how he's challenging shooters. It's everything that he's doing. With Vance Meyer, he's a little more, he has a little more range in the blue paint. Let's put it that way. He's one that will be more sporadic and try to make the save anywhere he can, any way he can. It's going to be Vance Meyer in Game 1, and it's going to be him if they get into trouble. Now, with that being said, too, the guys have to play in front of you. So you can't get defensively, forget to play defense because everything happens from the house out. So that's going to be up to the coaching staff to make sure their defensemen are responsible. And again, that's where, as I said off the top, I think Hanover has a little bit of an edge only because of the depth at that defensive position, because they have 4 bona fide guys who can be leaders on the blue line.
Yeah, it's interesting because, look, at the end of the day, both those guys, Szymanowski and Meyer, are very talented. They've shown it throughout the season. Meyer, of course, brought in as, a veteran guy who's got OJHL experience. Like, he's done his job here, and, dialed in is dialed in. I mean, there's no set way of saying, hey, that guy's more dialed in because he plays differently than this guy in the crease. If you're dialed in, you're dialed in. It doesn't matter. It's the old Tim Thomas adage, right? Throw your body in front of it. If you're stopping the puck, they don't care how pretty it looks. You don't have to be floating around looking like nothing phases you like Carey Price or something. You can do it a number of different ways, and that's what's great about the sport. If everybody played the same, it'd be boring to watch. And he certainly, yes, could be accused at times of maybe having happy feet and kind of sliding around a little bit. But when he's dialed in and he's tracking the puck, it really doesn't matter. All they care about is him keeping the puck out. And he has shown throughout the year that he can certainly do that when he's dialed in. McCabe, yeah, certainly a guy that is a little more old school in terms of relying on his mechanics, relying on his refinery of movement and his economic way of moving in there and using his size. And that's, something that's going to make this really interesting for me too, JK, is the very different ways that the goaltenders play in their crease. It's going to make for a very entertaining final for both of these teams in terms of trying to generate offense against these guys.
No, I agree 100%. We talk about the Barons veteran D. The looks that opposition get against McCabe, they're all from the outside. Barons D do a good job of keeping shooters to the outside. You don't see too many prime shots in the slot. So they're defensively responsible in their own end, and they have a great goaltender. They might fault once a game all of a sudden, but that's when you have a high-end goaltender like McCabe to make that save. So, he's going to stop all those shots from the perimeter. Back to Vance Meyer, getting pulled in game 5, and, coming back game 6, game 7, 2 goals against, 1 goal each game. That was a big test. So, my opinion is like he's their starter until he fumbles or until he loses it. But, it was a big challenge for him. Now he's 20 or 21 years old. And, how am I going to respond to this? Getting pulled in game 5. And Steve was at the game 6. He said he played really well. And then obviously game 7, him and Golly were outstanding. And just that power play goal by the Patriots, the start of the third, was the difference. But with goaltending it's like almost like being in the schoolyard with your big brother. If you kind of get carried away or you get, that someone's going to back you up. And essentially that's what Riley McCabe is more than what Vance Meyer is. But, both your goaltenders, it's going to be a big factor in the series for sure.
It certainly is. Well, guys, we've got a couple minutes left here. Let's do the hard part now. It's prediction time. Ooh. And these, Steve, over the years that I've been part of the crew with you, we've actually been pretty good at this. I went back to kind of some of our old texts and emails and got looking. We're actually pretty darn good at this. We got about a 90% hit rate on these Pollock Division finals. We've been pretty darn good. I'll let you start. How many games? Who ultimately do you feel is going to get the edge here and move on into the Schmaltz Conference Championships?
Yeah, you know what? This is going to be one of the toughest series, I think, to predict because of the dynamics of it. I also, thinking about the crowds, I texted JK earlier and asked him, how are these rinks going to be? Close proximity. Fans are going to travel easy back and forth travel. And there's a lot of middle ground between the two teams because you have that whole geographic space between the areas that both teams draw from. Durham specifically, one of those areas. You know what? Both teams are fantastic. They're both a lot of fun to watch and both put a lot of work in what they do. And in sports, you want to use the StatCast and all the analytics you want to and all this. But I think this one is going to come down to emotion. And will the Hanover Barons have enough hunger to drive them to that next level and be, that next team in the Pollock Division to claim a banner in their arena? We've seen a Walkerton, we've seen a Wingham, we've seen a Mitchell, we've seen a Mount Forest. Is it Hanover's turn this time? Hanover 7. I can't, 7 games for sure. And I'm just going to lean towards Hanover just because of the drive from last year's experience.
JK, what do you think?
I agree with Steve with the series is going to be 7 games for sure. And when you talk about emotion, Steve, it's I feel like there's so many connections between the two teams, coaches moving from each team, GMs, like there's so many, emotion. Like I think it's got to come from the top and whoever can keep it together. And I thought of this like for instance, game one, Wingham Mount Forest, the 5-0, a few fights, and being able to control your emotions. Like, you know what, we got another game. Like, the team that can forget the last game the quickest and get ready for the next game. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you can't get too wound tight, you know, especially within a game. You know, you want to get payback, or you want to get them for something, or, you know, you want to yell at someone's coach or whatever. Like, it's all that is going to be like both benches. I feel like on the ice, I think they're really close in talent. It's going to be bench management. You know, both teams are going to use their top line. Who's going to use it more? Is there going to be anything left in the tank in game 6 and 7? If you've used your top 2 lines, your top 6 guys, that's when your third and fourth lines could win it for you. But I'm going to go Pats in 7.
I like it. I'm going to side with Steve, and I'm going to also take the Hanover Barons in 7. You know, we talked in our last segment with our buddy Wayne Long, you know, reminiscing about the Cyclones and Colin Mercer saying after they lost to London that they were going to come back and they were going to get that Sutherland. They did. You'll remember Sabby at the start of this year, and we had him on this show too. You know, our buddy Blair Butcher, the general manager of the Hanover Barons, he said to us, we're going back and we're going to finish what we did not finish last year on our home ice in that game 7 that they lost to Mitchell. I just think a couple factors come to the fore for me. Riley McCabe, my Arthur guy, you know, a fellow Arthurite. We got to stick together. There's not very many of us Arthur boys out there. All right. So it's him, and my belief in him probably being the best player in this league, to be perfectly honest. It's a little bit of health that's concerning me on the Mount Forest side. And, you know, it's that old adage in the playoffs, the ice gets smaller. It becomes a little bit about of a war of attrition along the walls. And if that's going to hold true again here, I like the size and the mobility of that deep Hanover D-core paired with the brilliance of McCabe that will push them just over the edge of the Patriots. Because let's be honest here, they're a really talented team. Obviously, Rob Nixon, if you're listening to this and you end up winning the series, you can throw a pie right in my face after this. I'll happily eat a humble pie in the arena. You can throw it right in my face at center ice. They could absolutely win this series. And don't call me after you hear this, Nixie. All right. It's not like I don't believe in you guys. All right. I got to make a call here. I got to pick somebody. All right. No angry phone calls. I just think that Hanover, that hunger, that hurt from last year, we see teams at every level go through a hurt like that, and they come back and they do not want to do it again. And I just think that, coupled with the other things that I mentioned, is going to push Hanover to a Pollock Division championship. Either way, it's going to be incredible. These two gentlemen, I'll factor into it as well, but these two guys, Johnny K, Steve Sabourin, they're going to have the call of every single game of the final, whether it goes 4, whether it goes 7, and we'll follow, of course, the Pollock Division winner into the Schmaltz Cup playoffs as well. You can catch every single game on CKNX AM 920 and CKNX.ca. Just click listen live on the website. You can stream it anywhere on earth. We have people listen, like Wayne Long said, we've got people listening on vacation down south. We got people listening in the States, families all over Canada listening, wherever they are. You can listen anywhere. These two gentlemen will have the call for you. Guys, I really appreciate you doing this. It's going to be an incredible Pollock Division final. We'll take one more quick break and I'll wrap things up here on Instigating. Back to wrap things up here on Instigating with Clarkey and Drury. Ryan Drury still joined by Steve Sabourin. And for our TV viewers, you can go on to our YouTube channel to catch some bonus coverage here. We're going to do a quick little review of the first week or so here of the Blue Jays season. So make sure that you tune into our YouTube channel. As always, Friday nights at 8, Sunday nights at 9. You can watch this show on Whiteman TV. That's channel 6 for Whiteman subscribers. We debut on the YouTube channel every Friday at 9. You can follow us on social media at Instigating Pod. And remember, thanks to our great sponsors, Larry Hudson Chevrolet Buick GMC here in beautiful Listowel, Ontario. If you need a new car, a new truck, particularly, they love their trucks over there. Go see our friend Clarkey and the great staff over there at Larry Hudson's. And thanks to our friend Alan over at the Listowel Squash Courts. Easy to sign up, easy to book times to use the courts. It's very, very simple. Join our friends over there if you want to get active at the Listowel Squash Courts. Sabby, let's talk a little bit about the Bluebirds. Not been very good to start the year. 1-3 start. As we record this on Wednesday, they're currently up 1-0 as we watch here against the Royals, which is infuriating almost in and of itself. A wild win on opening day. They get 19 hits against a good Cardinals team who you could argue maybe have the best defense in all of baseball, let alone the National League. Defensively, they are an unbelievable team, and they got some great Hall of Fame players who hit for them too. Their pitching staff, I wouldn't call it the strongest, but they get a win in game 1, a big win on the road in a tough barn. Kudos to them. Jack Flaherty in game 2 practically hands the Blue Jays the game. He's like, please, Blue Jays, please just take this game. I'm going to walk 7 on you and load the bases twice. What do you think of that? And the Blue Jays say, well, pardon me. They offer up some Canadian politeness and they give it right back to old Jack, and the Birds and the Redbirds end up winning. The Cardinals take that one, and then they thoroughly outplayed the Jays in game 3. The pitching was not great. Then we roll over into the start of this Kansas City series. Jose Barrios was an absolute gas can, and so was Chris Bassett in his first start. That was almost as ugly. Barrios still just having all kinds of problems, and then lo and behold, out of nowhere, the savior from Japan, Yusei Kikuchi, comes in with a brilliant start. He was really, really good. What are your impressions of the Jays early on in this season? Am I panicking too much, or are you seeing, like I am, some of the issues from last year seeping into their play early this year?
Do you ever watch a movie trailer and the trailer looks absolutely awesome, and then you come out of the theater and going, oh my gosh, what did I just see?
Yes, I have, Vladdy Jr. Yes, I have.
So, I mean, yeah, it's too early to hit the panic button for sure. I mean, baseball is a marathon sport by far. However, with that being said, I don't think anybody expected the Jays to go 1-4 in their first 5 games. And it's Kikuchi that puts up the best pitching performance. Because if you look back at game number 1, Alek Manoah didn't have the best start of his career in that contest as well. You know what? The team's too good to be mediocre. You'll see things balance out. They have a lot of veterans on that team too. That will settle things down. Kevin Kiermaier being one of them. And, you know, when he played for Tampa Bay, hated him. He's the one guy who's like, why are you playing? Just sit him for this series. That's all you have to do. Fantastic ball player, smart on the base pass, and him batting 9th and Springer number 1, 1-2 punch, like incredible. They have to figure out the mechanics, and I think it will happen. I think you'll see the pitching staff settle down. The bullpen in that win in Kansas City in game number 2 was fantastic, coming in relief of Kikuchi. And they're going to get into a rhythm. I think you're going to see them get into a rhythm once they get into the Rogers Center and settle down. They're starting on the road, St. Louis, Kansas City, LA. When they go back to the Rogers Center for their home opener April 11th against Detroit, they'll ride that emotional wave and get back to business. I think you'll see them start rising through the crowd in the next month or so.
I guess, and you're right, it is too early. Like, we're not a month into the season. I guess my whole problem, Steve, is that I the expectations are so high, and all we heard last offseason at the trade deadline last year, and then with the disappointing way the season ended this offseason as well, was we've really improved this team. And this offseason especially, we traded away some guys. We wanted to bring more veteran guys in, have a bit more of a professional approach, whatever that means. Ross Atkins on the bench. You know, the home run jacket's gone. We're not throwing peanuts at each other after we hit dingers, which we've only hit 2 as of this recording. Weirdly enough, and this is not something to worry about, but weirdly enough, they were the last team in the majors to hit their first home run, which is weird. They're going to be well up there in home runs. They got plenty of power in this lineup. I guess my problem with the 1-3 start was, with the way this team's constructed, the expectations attached to it, the payroll, the other teams in your division, and all of the talk we heard about the improvements, coupled with the way they ended last season with one of the most embarrassing playoff losses in baseball history. I'll just say that loss, and we all know what I'm talking about. I don't need to bring up the score again. It's a meme now. That loss to Seattle is one of the most embarrassing. They crapped their pants on national television in front of everybody, Steve. That's what they did. That's why I think I'm a little more sore about this 1-3 start, because is it too much to ask for 2-2? Too much to ask for 3-1? Yankees come roaring out. The Rays come out 4-0. The Rays, as of this recording, are still undefeated, teeing off on Washington. Just for them to start the series, fine, I'll give you a series loss against the Cardinals. That's a legit damn ball club over there. That's a legit club. But then to come out of it and go, okay, we choked one away. We had a good opening day win. And then the third game's just a wash for our new pitcher. It was a bad showing. To then turn around and go into Kansas City. We're not going into Yankee Stadium. We're going into Kansas City against one of the worst rosters in baseball and do that. I mean, come on here. Like, where were the bats to help out Barrios a little bit? I was just a little frustrated by that. The one thing I'll say is we know that the bats are going to come around. The one thing I'm still really concerned about is the bullpen. I still look at that bullpen and I look back at the last number of World Series winners, and I'm looking at that bullpen, and outside of 2, maybe 3 of the arms in there, I don't love what I see in comparison to what other teams roll out, Steve. And that reared its ugly head in the playoffs last year too.
Yeah, and, again, I think it's going to, take a couple of weeks before everything kind of, the equilibrium sets in. You talk about panicking at, 1-3, starting off a little slow. Well, thank goodness you're not a Philadelphia fan, because the Phillies were 0-4.
Well, yeah,
so,
I'm not panicking. I'm venting. I'm frustrated. Can I have that?
I mean, that also comes out with, it was a big buildup. It was a big buildup in the offseason of all these big moves that they made and the money that they're spending, the signing of the contracts with, Guerrero Jr. and Bichette and this and that. When you look at last year, Danny Jansen and Alejandro Kirk were the biggest 1-2 punch for catchers in the league. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that happened last year that you're wondering will repeat this year. But they also have a different set of tools. And I really like that win against Kansas City in game 2 of the series because, yeah, they didn't crush the ball out of the park for the most part, but they manufactured runs. And I think that's going to be key down the road. If you get 1 or 2 men on and you drive the double up the gap, that scores the runs just like a home run does. So, I mean, and when you get down to better pitching into the latter stages of the season or a pennant race, they're going to try to keep you from hitting that home run. And that's when you're going to have to manufacture runs. And one thing, Varsho, they did a whole segment on him before the game the other night, left-handed hitter who is training himself to drive the ball the other way to take the outside pitches for a ride. And so far it's worked for him. So I think once things start to, you get through the rush of the opening week, you get your home opener under your belt, I think they will be fine. I can tell you, for the most part, as a fan, I am more confident now than I've been for a while with the roster that they have at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the fundamentals are starting to show early, even though they haven't been lighting up the win column. The fundamentals you can see are there defensively. I think they're going to be very stout. Let's stop talking about the Jays because they're going to come good here. I think everybody's confident in that. Just not very happy with the start. Would have loved for them to start 3-2, 3-1. Of course.
Look at the bright side. Look at the bright side. They now have poutine dogs at.
They have poutine dogs, brother.
So there you go.
And you know what? I got to look at the bright side a little bit too, because I also do have an affinity for the plucky underdog, no, support from ownership, Oakland Athletics. And they're winning some games to start the year. They're hanging around with the Guardians and knocking it around with the Angels, and they beat Ohtani on opening day, for God's sake. I mean, hey, the swinging A's are still involved with a peanut roster, and that's no disrespect. These guys are in the majors, but I will say this: I'm a big fan of the new rules. I don't know what you think so far. But the three big changes, obviously the shift limiting on the infield, and because you can still shift as much as you want in the outfield, but the shift limiting on the infield, the bigger bases, and the pitch clock. I'm a big fan. I was never going to not watch anyway, and the old purists that were harping and complaining about it, they're watching anyway. And I think this will, with the faster pace of play and action on the base paths, I think it will bring newer fans in. I'm a big fan of the way the new rules have impacted this first week of baseball. Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I like the pitch clock. So they actually had the pitch clock in the game of softball a couple seasons before, of course, the majors introduced it. But anyways, no, I like the pitch clock. It keeps the game moving. The other thing I like is the batter can only call one timeout per at bat. So
huge.
You can't continuously call timeout, because it had nothing to do with you getting ready as a hitter. It had everything to do to disrupt the pitcher's rhythm.
Yes.
So you kept on delaying. And I mean, same with the pitcher stepping off the mound, like trying to play the.
It went back and forth
all the time. I can tell you, with the shift idea, you know what? If you don't like the shift, learn to hit the ball the other way. Like, I mean, you had so many guys trying to pull the ball, and the shift is to allow those hitters to power it out and provide some excitement. But you know what? From a defensive standpoint, like if the team wants to play a shift and the other team starts hitting the ball the other way on mistakes, then that's your problem. And that's the other thing with the shift too, is now with the pitch clock, you don't have as much time to execute your game plan because there's more, I'm not going to say rushed, but you're not going to be able to reset as a pitcher for a longer time. So, it's going to open the door to a little more missed assignments as he hung the ball or it drifted out over the plate, and give those batters an opportunity. So it is what it is. If you had to create a rule to stop the shift because hitters couldn't hit properly, then whatever. But I do like the clock. I do like the limited timeouts. I do like if you bring in a reliever, he's got to stay in for 3 batters.
Yeah.
And because, I mean, at the end of the day, when you say, oh, well, that takes away the lefty-righty matches and all this kind of stuff. Well, you know what? These are major league players. If you can't handle a batter, 3 batters, then why are you in the bullpen? So
I would just like to say, and this will not matter at all to our viewers, but literally as you were talking about this, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Placata, good night. It's out of here. My fantasy team is on fuego. I just want to say for everybody, my first 2 picks in fantasy baseball this year, Vlad Jr., Pete Alonso, back-to-back. My team name, the Placata Polar Bears. Thank you very much. I'll see myself out. I will say this, Steve. I agree with you on the shift. We talked about that when this was talked about, on this show when we had you on toward the end of last year. There's an argument to be said for that. Just learn to hit the other way. I'm sure Ted Williams is rolling around in his grave right now. But I think ultimately with the way the game was starting to be played, where guys were lining up almost in a wall, that something had to be done. And ultimately, so far, I think the positives are outweighing the negatives of going, well, you're a major leaguer. You should learn to hit. I'll say this courtesy of Codify Baseball, the first 75 games of last year, 635 runs scored, 734 singles, 152 homers, 55 steals. The first 79 games of this season, 723 runs, almost 100 more, 868 singles, 134 more, 193 home runs, 41 more, 101 steals, nearly double the amount of steals. And I think that's the thing I like the most. The bigger bases, one rule, one stickler as part of the bigger bases as well before we go, Steve, that I really like. The pitcher can only throw over there 3 times. And if you can't pick a guy off the 3rd time, he gets the base. I like that a lot too. And it's causing more steals, more excitement, and more pace of play. And I'm a big fan.
Absolutely. And when you get the hit and runs and that sort of thing, those types of strategies mixed in, bunting, I think you could see bunting starting to make a more return. We saw Varsho bunt for a base hit the other night. That creates excitement. Points on the board doesn't always mean excitement. You can have a very exciting
You're right.
4-3. Yeah, you can have exciting 4-3 game for sure. But it's how you get there, and the steals and all of those aspects play into it in a big way.
Yeah, and we're seeing those still too. Today I watched some great defensive battles. We're still seeing those, and on the other side of it, on the defensive side of the ball, we're seeing guys being forced to show their athleticism a little more, and the Lindors of the world, the Arenados of the world, the Matt Chapmans, my guy, those guys. They're out there making incredible plays, and they're being called into action to do it more often. I shudder for the task of the people that are going to have to pick the 100 best MLB plays of the year, because they're going to have to shave off 300 or 400 extra great plays because of the way that the game is being played right now. And it's really, really exciting stuff. Sabby, thanks so much for joining the show this week, brother. It's always a pleasure to have you on. Best of luck calling the Pollock Division final. I can't wait to jump on with you and Johnny K. It's going to be fantastic, man. Thanks for doing this.
All for love of the game, man.
Absolutely. For the love of the game. Johnny K Sports, the one and only. We love it. Thanks everybody for watching the show this week. We'll be back next week with more Instigating.